Hey, Armand here, forecasting for the week of June 16th, 2025. Last week was busy. This week is busy. We're going to start sort of on the 14th or 15th, the weekend before the official start of this forecast. And the reason for that, of course, is that the planets don't really stick on a weekly schedule. We've talked about that before. Things build and then they kind of reach their peak and then they sort of trail off and the influence kind of wanes over time. We've been feeling the influence of the Mars-Uranus square, which is exact early on Sunday. We've been feeling that all week long. We have Mars, the planet of action, and Uranus, a very unpredictable, some would even say unstable planet, revolutionary, rapid changes of circumstances. And when these two planets get together, we have quite the mix of things. They're not, it's funny. They're not in signs that they're unhappy with themselves, but Mars isn't happy with the sign that Uranus is in, and Uranus isn't happy with the sign that Mars is in. Mars is in Leo. Uranus doesn't like Leo that much. I don't know if that's true. How do you not like Leo? That's crazy. That's crazy. But anyway, so they would say. Meanwhile, Uranus is in Taurus, where so just as well as any other sign, but Mars doesn't particularly like Taurus. So they say. I don't know. People that have natal Mars in Taurus, there's a few good things going for them. Anyway, this isn't an astrology lesson. Let's make this into a class. If you're interested in the introduction to astrology class, then you should go to armanddiaz.com, send me an email. I'll send you what you need to do to register, hopefully get everybody registered by this Wednesday. And then the class is going to start on June 25th. You can attend it live or you can attend it, in recordings. We'll have private, not for everybody, private YouTube recordings that you'll watch and we'll interact. It'll be great. Anyway, this isn't a commercial. This isn't a commercial. So Mars Uranus. Okay, unpredictable action. We're going to have unpredictable action. A little uncertainty going on here, but it's active. It's active. And Mars is at the end of Leo. Mars is at the end of Leo, and so we're likely to see some rather dramatic action. Now, on a simple local kind of level for like you, me, and the people we run into, people are going to have a short fuse this weekend, okay? People are going to be a little hot under the collar, more than usual. You may feel tensions rising within you as well. Um, it's an explosive kind of energy. We've been feeling it all week long. Some stuff has happened during the course of the week. I think that the Israeli airstrike on Iran is a example of it, but it's not the only example of it. There's a lot of stuff been going on, and we're kind of reaching a kind of peak. I don't know. Hopefully, nothing else bad will happen on the scale, but you know how it goes. So we've got this sort of peak of energy on the collective level. We see it in our personal lives. We're likely to see it. There's not a lot of let's just take it easy and let things go kind of energy here. One thing that I don't like being U.S. centric. You know that. You know that. And well, I mean, I'm talking about Israel and Iran. That's not U.S. centric. But on Saturday, we of course have President Trump's military parade, which is very, very Mars and Leo. I've described Mars and Leo long before there was any plans for such a parade. I described Mars and Leo as being a military parade. Mars, the god of war, in Leo, drama and show and look at us type of thing. It reminds me very much of like the old Soviet, they'd have the parades there on May Day, that kind of thing going on. You probably don't remember that. I'm not sure I really remember, but I saw pictures of it. I remember that much. Anyway, so Trump's parade actually not only is Mars and Leo very appropriate for this, but it's actually Mars is going over Trump's ascendant on the day of, or maybe we have to wait for Sunday or something. Close enough. He's just passed his Mars return, that 2 year cycle of energy. He's getting a little bit more of that pump up of energy there, and Mars goes over his ascendant. It would all seem to be very, much in his favor, except for the fact that Uranus is squaring Mars. And so we'll have to see how that works. We could expect some surprises. We'll certainly expect that the collective will have all different opinions about it. Here's something else that's going on. And this aspect, well, on a personal level, you got to be a little careful about Mars Uranus. This one is much more a collective kind of aspect, unless, of course, you're a Sagittarius or Sag rising. And that is that Jupiter is squaring Saturn this weekend. And the Jupiter Saturn cycle began back in late 2020, in December of 2020. I believe it was on the solstice in December of 2020. Um, and they met at 0 degrees of Aquarius, setting off the whole cycle of social political change for the next 20 years. If you recall, and I bet you can, this was kind of the time what we might call, what I like to call peak DEI, right? This was the point in time in which that became like the framework for which things were getting done on the social and political level. Universities and companies, everything was about the whole DEI initiative. Other things too. Black Lives Matter, all of the grassroots movement of the people. And and on all sides of the political spectrum, I think it was, but at 0 degrees Aquarius, I think that we saw that most dramatically in the ways that I am describing. Now Jupiter and Saturn are squaring each other, as they have been for most of the last year. But now this is the last time, and this is the payoff square, you might call it. Now Jupiter is in Cancer, where he's very happy, very well dignified, has a lot of good energy. Let's think about this as a progressive kind of energy. If we could hope for Jupiter in Cancer being very compassionate energy at the collective level, a bit more compassion. That'd be lovely. But Cancer is also a fairly traditional sign. It is the sign of the U.S. Jupiter as well. So, but it's generally speaking, this is the beneficent ruler type of thing. And then we have Saturn, who's not at all happy to be in Aries. Saturn in Aries could be the authoritarian authority figure. That's not a good phrase, is it? Authoritarian authority figure. It's a little redundantical. But yeah, but it is an authoritarian authority figure. Oh, but also Saturn in Aries puts a check on that kind of my way, I'm doing it because I'm in charge and I can do what I want to do kind of energy that authoritarians have. So, the planets, they give and they take. If I was to look at, I mean, a lot of things are going to happen all over the world. If I was going to look at this, and I'll be a little US centric again, I would say that the Jupiter Saturn square in from Cancer to Aries, on the one hand, we have the military parade, right? And on the other hand, we also have a lot of pride parades, right? This weekend we have two flavors of parades. I think in New York City, the next weekend would be the big parade, but it's not all about New York City, let alone being US centric. Um, but here on Long Island, I know Pride parades this weekend and Trump's parade in Washington, the military parade. And that's the square. That is exactly the square. And choose your parade. Choose your parade. But it's a square, so probably can't choose both. We're sort of being asked, well, which parade do you want to go to? Now, if you're not in the US, you just have to take this as an analogy and just work it out, work it out on a local level. I the US making such a, I don't like being US centric, but the US making such a spectacle of itself lately, it's kind of hard to avoid. Okay, that we come into the week of June 16th with that behind us. And Mars on Tuesday goes into Virgo, leaves Leo after being there. I mean, essentially, he's out of the shadow of his retrograde, but he was in Cancer and Leo really since last summer, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. So finally moving on to a different sign. Mars in Virgo, uh, it favors all kinds of, it's detailed action. It favors service, is what it really favors. That's the important thing. Service energy. Good, good time to do a little volunteering if you're up for it. This would be a very good time to start thinking about doing a little bit of volunteering. Okay, that's Mars going into Virgo, and we'll follow Mars around on his trip through Virgo and elsewhere as we go along. Now we have uh, Jupiter squares Neptune, right? Jupiter has squared Saturn already. Jupiter squares Neptune this week. That happens on Wednesday, but the Jupiter Neptune square is a it's another one of those collective aspects. Jupiter and Neptune have a lot to do with progressive social movements, the caring for the masses type of thing. I in the Jupiter and Cancer video, I mentioned that this was associated with socialist and communist, uh, well, in in history, this was associated with significant movements of socialism and communism. Uh, but it doesn't have to be looked at in exactly that way. But it is the Jupiter, especially in Cancer, compassion, right? Jupiter, compassion. And then Neptune without boundaries, except Neptune is in Aries. Neptune is in Aries. Um, and that is Mars sign. And I'm wondering if it isn't a kind of, you know, a determined sort of compassion. This is, if I wonder if it doesn't fuel a kind of radical sort of extremist. Maybe you might agree with the goal, but maybe the means are going to be a little bit mean. We'll have to see. And, there's not a judgment on that. I mean, this uh, kindness and compassion on every side would be the thing that I would hope for and look for. But if you get short of that, you get it on both sides of the spectrum and stuff like that. It's just part of the picture. Okay, so um, on Friday, June 20th at 10:41 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. That's 7:41 p.m. Pacific. Oh gosh, you have to look, add 4 hours for Greenwich, right? So we're at 2:41 on the 21st Greenwich, and that would be 3:41 a.m. BST, and the rest of you guys just have to figure it out for yourselves. It doesn't really matter, right? It's the 20th, 21st. It's if you're in the northern hemisphere, it's summertime, and if you're in the southern hemisphere, then it is winter time. So this is a peak, right? The sun has reached the northward peak. This is as far north as he goes. Excuse me being northocentric, but I'm going to be. This is the northern peak. This is as high as the sun goes. Um, the longest days, the start of summer. Alas, there's only one way to go. When you reach the zenith, there's only one way to go, and that is down. And so slowly, because things don't change very much around the solstice. It's not like around the equinox. Things change very slowly, but slowly the days start getting shorter. What a paradox. If you are in the southern hemisphere, it's the shortest day of the year. It's the beginning of winter. But the other side of the story is the days start getting longer. And so when you've reached the bottom, there's nowhere to go but up. The sun is not going to be having the opportunity to sit back and engage in the philosophical discussions about reaching peaks and valleys and so on, because the sun is going to be very busy for the next week as it aspects Saturn and Neptune and Jupiter. And that's really going to be happening. Let's see. The only one that really happens on our watch for this forecast is that the sun is going to square Saturn. That's the first thing that happens, and that happens on the 22nd, which, if I'm correct, is Sunday. Yeah, I'm correct. And that is a sort of a tough aspect, right? The sun is at its peak, very strong in the sign of Cancer, mm, which is not Saturn's favorite sign. And Saturn is in Aries, which is not Saturn's favorite sign. And so the sun kind of had, but it is the sun's favorite sign, I should mention. The sun seems to have the advantage here. Now, Sun Saturn aspects come across as ego deflators, right? That is the typical thing. If you've gotten a little puffed up, Saturn will deflate the ego. If you have, but it'll also, I mean, to be fair, Sun Saturn aspects can just be a little tough when it comes to, how you're feeling about things and all of that. It's just, it can sort of take the joy out of things. But the way I see it playing out over the course of the weekend of the 21st and 22nd is more like something tries to deflate you, something seems to bring you down, but it doesn't really have quite the energy to do so, right? It seems like a little bit of a hassle, a little bit of like a meh from something or other brings you down a bit. Now, if you're really puffed up and inflated, as we may see at the collective level, then, well, maybe it'll be a little bit more serious than that. I should mention that at the same time, Mars is sextiling Jupiter. Now, Mars is in Virgo with Jupiter in Cancer. And that is, again, seems like a very productive aspect. Again, service and, lending a hand to something would be one really positive manifestation of this, if you can. Short of that, Virgo, Cancer, well, if maybe you did, maybe during the course of the last few months when I said it would be a good time to go clean the garage because well, if you didn't do it, well, now maybe this is the time you're going to get out there and do that. Anyways, next week the sun is going to deal with Neptune and going to meet with Jupiter, and it's going to be big stuff going on. So don't forget to subscribe, hit like. Thank you for watching all the way out to the end of this fairly long weekly forecast. We'll see you next time.